Hello, welcome to the Help Project, where we're discussing the Gospel of Matthew, Part 8, Chapter 13 is where we're up to. So if you join us, and if you're joining us live, feel free to ask questions as we go. I've got Darren with me at the moment, so you can see Darren on the screen. There you go. He's in Australia. It's the morning for you, Darren, isn't it? How early?
Yeah. Oh, we're good. Yeah.
How early are you?
It's 7 o'clock in the morning,
7 o'clock.
and the apocalypse hasn't hit yet. We're all good.
It's not quite here in
No.
in the UK. Let's not go for apocalypse. Yeah, we're in lockdown again in the UK.
Yeah.
It's 8 o'clock, and yeah, life is interesting. But we're going to be studying, looking through the Gospel of Matthew this evening, going through one chapter. We managed to go through chapters 11 and 12 4 weeks ago. So we're just going to keep going through. And if you're watching, feel free to, as I said, ask us questions. Feel free to get involved. And one thing, as we just to say, I think I said it the last time we were on here, Darren, was just the continual strength of the conditional case from Matthew, just continually repeated through. And I know Matthew 10:28 is pretty strong, where it says destroy body and soul. But when we get the more we go through, starting from chapter 1 all the way through, just reinforces the destruction idea. And then we get to, I'm already seeing Matthew 25, and I've defended it online already using this. You can just go through Matthew and go, look, destroy means killed, destroy means killed, destroy means completely torn apart, destroy means like no life. Repeatedly, we get to Matthew 25. Hey, this is what eternal punishment is. No life. and so we can kind of get there from Matthew. So I'm just continually seeing that through. I'm also quite enjoying going through Matthew. I've been, just a bit of a shout out, been listening to, so I quite like Bible Project, but I've also been listening to Tim Mackey's My Strange Bible. And he goes through Matthew. Unfortunately, I was looking forward to it. I was like, oh, I'd love to hear what he says on chapter 3. Unfortunately, someone else taught that, so it's not on his podcast. But going through Sermon on the Mount, eventually I'll catch up with where we're at and see what he says. Hopefully he does Matthew 10. I'll be interested to see what he comes up with there. But just so much really cool, interesting theology that has just come through. So looking forward to this. Matthew 13. I don't have too much of an overview. I think we're just going to read it, and because we're going to do a summary at some further point of everything that we've discussed, whenever that might be, maybe 2022 at this rate. We'll see where we get to, and let's just get stuck in. So there's I just realized I haven't got the notes that you've kindly sent me. There we go. So that's our introduction. That's what we're doing. You've got something to say, and then we'll crack on.
Yeah, well, I think what you've been talking about is the benefit of studying a whole letter, a whole book, a whole gospel, and trying to ascertain the themes, how that author thinks, how they're unpacking themes. And I think debates like the whole debate get bogged down in proof texting, and you might throw a little bit of context in there. You do need to do that. Exegesis of close examination of particular verses requires you to be choosy about which context you're going to bring in, but that's not all you can do in biblical studies. You can look at the whole of the narrative. I learned that through my studies in my second, it was a master's subject in John, so my second one at college, where we looked at it from a literary point of view through narrative criticism and other literary ways of looking at the Bible. So their premise is always look at the whole. Like, you're not really going to understand the message unless you understand the whole. So that's what I've kind of been trying to do with Matthew, is look at the whole message. And it's not always obvious how any one given discussion exactly relates to conditionalism, but and that will probably be obvious today when I'm talking about the first interpreted parable in Matthew 13. But I've noticed a theme within Matthew where Jesus is presented as, well, Matthew has what I think is an apocalyptic worldview. So he's not Revelation. When you look at it, you'll see parts of Matthew where it looks a little bit like Revelation. It's got that vibe to it, that cosmic rule, that cosmic. Well, you get that, but you also get, and much more, Jesus living that out in the earthly realm. So he's the boss. So we're in the apocalyptic, the cosmic worldview. You've got God as the Lord of history, and he's the Lord of kings, and he dictates everything. In Matthew, you've got Jesus like the narrative embodiment of that. He's walking around, and these demons are scared of him. They already know they're defeated since Matthew 4, where Jesus was tempted and defeated the devil. The devil's just run away with his tail between his legs. And you've had demons come up. The oppression of people is akin to them being sick. So when Jesus heals people, it's often akin with him throwing them out of them, exercising them. So it's all blended into one. And it's, as I said, Jesus is the narrative embodiment of that cosmic king who's got that Lord over all of history. Yet he's in history. So I noted, I'll come back when I discuss to what I was just saying. I'll come back to highlight that again when we talk about the first interpreted parable in Matthew 13. But I noticed when I was doing my my notes for this session that I remembered that I noted something about Matthew 12. I'll read that passage out because I've been thinking about that and how that relates to this broader theme. And I hope this is okay. It's not exactly CI, but it's going to be a lot of the background and foundation of what I say later, say about Matthew 25:41. So I'm just going to, and I think this helps us interpret that verse. But okay, I'll read that verse out. I was going to get you to, but I'm already talking.
Matthew
20:14-21. I'll read it out. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him. Jesus, aware of this, withdrew from there, and many followed him and he healed them all, and ordered them not to make him known. This was to fulfill what was known by the prophet Isaiah. Behold, my servant, whom I have chosen, my beloved, with whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel or cry aloud, nor will any hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smouldering wick he will not quench, until he brings justice to victory. And in his name the Gentiles will hope. Do you remember me highlighting that last time, Philip?
Yeah, too. So do I, but your reference in your notes is Matthew 20. Got me totally confused there. So I've just
20.
gone. We haven't done 20, so I was really confused why we're doing 20.
You know what?
It's like this sounds like 12.
So like 12. Why did I say 20? Why did I write 20?
It's all good.
Brain says one thing,
I've got it.
Fingers do another.
I could actually put 12 up. I was like, I kind of vaguely recall this, but I don't remember it being in chapter 20. And then I just had 20 on the screen, and I was like, this isn't what you're reading. So
No, I probably even said 20, 14 to 12, 21.
It's all good.
So it's in here, and it comes out wrong.
There we go. The justice to victory. Yeah, absolutely. I
remember that? Okay.
Yeah.
So I at the time, I think I suggested that in Matthew 13:40 and following, that's where he's bringing that justice. But you'll notice here he's alluding back to I'll put my spirit on him and will no, it's not there. Where is it? I just saw it there, and then it's gone. And Jesus, aware of this, withdrew from there and followed him, and he healed them, and he ordered them not to make him known. This was to fulfill what was spoken of the prophet Isaiah. Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved, with whom my soul is well pleased. What does that remind you of? I will put my spirit upon him. What does that remind you of? That reminds me of Matthew 3, the end there, where he's baptized. He comes up, the heavens are opened up him. So he's got access to that cosmic realm, all right? And then you go into the temptation, and he has that victory over the devil, the tempter. Yeah? So, but he's saying right now, he's got this verse, or this quotation for Isaiah, where he's saying, and it's not an exact quotation either. He changes it. It's not exact to the Old Testament or the Septuagint. But he's saying through the quote that, but I'm keeping it quiet at the moment. So there's this one who is Lord of the cosmos, who's in history, who is actually keeping it quiet. But he's saying, you know what? There's coming a time when I'm going to bring justice to victory. And I thought, oh, is that the cross? And I thinking to myself, no, because no, this is the only time where victory is used. That word it's not used of when he dies. I looked it up a few times. I'm just going to go through my notes, but I think I firmed up on that position that this is what he's doing. I looked up the word judgment and victory. Victory doesn't appear again, I think, even in the Bible. It doesn't, certainly not in Matthew. So I don't think Matthew is relating it to the cross. But if you go back, we discussed Matthew 11 and 12, so those chapters, and often talked about the day of judgment. That word behind judgment is krisis. Yeah. Right. I'll read out those verses. All right. Matthew 11:22. But I tell you, it will be more bearable on the day of judgment. That's krisis for Tyre and Sodom. And then he's got 24. 11:24, but I tell you that it will be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom. Day of judgment. Krisis again. 12:28. Behold, my servant, whom I've chosen, my beloved, with whom my soul is well pleased. I put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. Same word, krisis.
That's the same word. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same word. I know it's translated different, slightly different context. So Matthew 12:20. A bruise. Yeah, that's the one we just read. 12:36. I'll tell you on the day of judgment, krisis, justice, judgment. People will give an account for every careless word they speak. Okay. 12:41. The men of Nineveh will rise up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it. Okay. 42. The queen of the south will rise up at the judgment. Krisis. It's all the same word.
It's all there.
All right. So this, I think when Jesus brings that together with judgment and victory, he's talking about that judgment of the last day. That justice is what's happening on that day of judgment. And I think Matthew 13:40 to 43 is unpacking that a little bit in some detail, but it does it in more of an apocalyptic way, more overtly, cosmically, which we'll get to. Isn't that interesting how you get the narrative of Jesus on this earth demonstrating that kind of power over everything, everyone, the demons, the devil, humans, but he's also the same Jesus that not just at the same time he's revealing, he's suppressing the revelation, but he's going to reveal it anyway. There's going to be an appointed time. I find that fascinating.
I just always find it fascinating when you start to see themes just run through, and with that one, I don't think we'd connected the number of judgment, justice. I
hadn't.
Guess it makes sense that it connects, but maybe we did. I'm trying to remember if we actually talked about it in our last stream.
Not in those terms.
Not in those terms.
I hadn't looked at that word, krisis. I only did that this time. I think last time I didn't have time to do it, and I was tentative. I'm still fairly tentative, but I think I'm firming up. But I want to reiterate again, this is really important for later when we talk about Matthew 25, especially terms like, prepare the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels, because if you get this theme in Matthew 11, 12, and then you see it unpacked fairly clearly in 13:40, and you can see what that fire is doing, then we really can see 25:41 as having just been part of that same theme. You shouldn't see it in isolation. So that preparing for shouldn't be, it should relate to that super heated fire in 13:42. And that should be seen with bringing justice. And then what does Jesus say there about that fire and what it does to all evil? So I'm letting the cat out of the bag, but I really am cognizant of the, that I'm really getting off track a lot by discussing this. But I want to show people that you really do need to understand how themes are unpacked in the, in a whole book rather than just take, verses here and there.
Yeah, no, that's really, it's really helpful, and it's all these extra themes that fit in, and the completion of victory or victory of justice. It is a funny phrase, justice to victory,
or judgment to victory.
Judgment to victory. There will
this
be victory.
Day of judgment is when it's being enacted. Right in this, in the middle of his ministry, he is deliberately not, judging them. He's letting them go, and the demons recognize this. Have you come to torment us before the time? No, and they're not even understanding him. So, you get the torment bit wrong. But there's a time, there's a now not yet kind of going on here where, well, there's a time when that will come. Yeah. And there's a time that's kind of, that falls in line with the Old Testament, New Testament emphasis on there is a day when all wrongs will be right, not the other way around. Everything will be made right. You've got people in the Old Testament who promised these really great things, and that promise that, just take Psalm 37, they would live in the land forever, and the evil people would pass away, die, be destroyed. They're just like grass or smoke. That never really is played out in human history. And so that day of judgment, that day when everything will be righted, was developed in biblical theology. And I think that's what Jesus is getting on about here, but he's inserting himself into that history. And he's saying, I am central to everything that happens.
Yeah. And that's continually, Matthew wants to see that Jesus is central. That's continually, and just looking at the structure of Matthew of how these R.T. France in his commentary just shows that after 10 you've got the calling of the apostles, you've got the teaching before that in 5 to 7. It's continually these responses to who Jesus is. He wants you to see that different people are responding to Jesus in different ways. We have John's response in chapter 11 where he's uncertain. I think you're the Christ, but should I expect someone else? And then you've got these different passages that are like, Jesus is central. You need to deal with this person. And now he's got the power to judge and bring justice, judgment to victory. Like that, I think that's actually a really huge thing. And just to frame it from a traditionalist perspective, does judgment ever come to completion? Is there a complete victory if the judgment is continually being carried out forever? So the arguments that you and I both know,
I would
Darren,
say it does.
But I think you have to twist the word of completion and victory. I think it's just another one of those words in our argument. I think to just let it plainly speak. What does it mean to bring something to victory? What does it mean to bring something to completion? Is it really a victory?
Right.
So
here we go. You've actually just stumbled on something I hadn't thought of. You just stumbled on a great little response to this idea that the charge that annihilation. It's not. How is that just? or something like that. Here's Jesus very clearly, talking about judgment and just in relation to the victory, and then in 13 he will unambiguously define that in terms of being incinerated in a fire, annihilation. Like they're burned up. Whether there's ashes or left is immaterial. That kind of molecular disintegration isn't what we have in mind anyway. When we talk about annihilation, the life
Yep.
ends. Okay,
Yep.
so there's that justice, that judgment and justice, rightly by Jesus being associated. Well, I think Matthew is leading us up to that, right? So the 11 and 12 is preparing our minds, and then boom, he goes in 13. But I'm going to segue a little bit into 13 now, and I'll let you read the first bit of Matthew 13. But you've got two interpreted parables by Jesus. It's a very complex little structure. So you've got a parable given, you've got an interjection where Jesus teaches something else, and then Jesus's interpretation of his parable. And there's a whole lot of themes in there. I'm not going to get them all today. What I'm going to do is just get some common threads that I can, that relate to what I've been talking about. And the first one's really about Jesus himself. With the interjection is about him saying, well, I don't tell them everything. I'm withholding revelation because they can't understand anyway. That's in a parable that's talking about the four soils. So the seeds don't grow equally. Some flourish, some whatever. And then the second parable is more. It's about this. It's a story about a guy going and sowing this crop, and then the enemy comes and sows another crop in amongst it. And you don't. The idea is you don't do anything until the day of harvest, because by pulling out the weeds, you're going to destroy the wheat. It's not ready yet. There's not a time. It's not the right time. So, and again, there's another interjection by Jesus in the interpretation. So that's quite complex. So I want to spend a little bit of time on the first one and most of the time on the second.
Cool.
But if you could read from 13:1 to, and not chapter 20, because that's wrong if I say that. 13:1 to 23, I think.
Yeah, 1 to 20. That's cool. Happy to. Cool. So that's coming up on the screen as well. I'll just. I know it's different from yours, but we can play around with different translations. This one's the NET.
I don't care. People say, what's your favorite translation? I don't care if it rendered it. If there's an issue, I talk about Greek. And there's some of it.
I wouldn't use amplified, but yeah.
If there's a difference in what we've got here, what I'm reading or I'm talking about, and what you might see in your version, that's a good thing, because you go, well, why is that translated differently? Then that's where you know where to dig. When I don't know Hebrew, and when I did Old Testament exegesis was in English, that's what we did. We lined up 4 or 5 good translations. Oh, that's different there. I will dig there. That's where you look at the commentaries, because they're making different decisions. And why they're making different decisions? Okay, you discover that, and then you make a decision yourself. That's exegesis. And that's why, I don't care about one translation. Yeah,
I mean you're not a King James only.
I do use that. If someone's a King James person, I'll go there. But I can tell again. I can follow the same process and
absolutely.
dig. And
it's still
I love getting the textual tradition behind the King James and showing how it's the same as, like, for instance, katakio, which means to incinerate. It's behind the King James word there, to burn up, in 1340, as much as it comes from the actual parable. And I can actually show them that their own textual tradition behind it is saying the same thing as what mine is. So I like doing that.
It's helpful. It's helpful. It's almost like the same Bible. Cool. Well, let's go into 13. I've taken you down. That was my fault. I led you down that rabbit hole. So we'll keep going. Right, here we go. So 13:1 to 23. On that day, after Jesus went out of the house, he sat by the lake, and on such a large crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat to sit, while the whole crowd stood on the shore. He told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil. They sprang up quickly, because the soil was not deep. But when the sun came up, they were scorched, and because they did not have sufficient root, they withered. Other seeds fell among the thorns, and they grew up and choked them. But other seed fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100 times as much as some 60, and some 30. The one who has ears had better listen." Then the disciples came to him and said, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" He replied, "You have been given the opportunity to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but they have not. For whoever has will be given more and will have an abundance, but whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. For this reason I speak to them in parables. Although they see, they do not see, and although they hear, they do not hear, nor do they understand. And concerning them, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled. That says, you will listen carefully, yet will never understand. You will look closely, yet never comprehend. For the heart of his people has become dull. They are hard of hearing, and they have shut their eyes, so that they would not see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But your eyes are blessed because they see, and your ears because they hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous people long to see it, to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. So listen to the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed sown on rocky ground is the person who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. But he has no root in himself and does not endure. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, immediately he falls away. The seed sown among thorns is the person who hears the word, but worldly cares and the seductiveness of wealth choke the word, so it produces nothing. But as for the seed sown on good soil, this is the person who hears the word and understands it. He bears fruit, yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. There you go.
There you go. Okay, so look at the characterization of Jesus, how he's characterizing himself there. I think I said it before, where he's really got ultimate control there over who's getting what revelation. I know that's based on their own, who they are within themselves, their hearts are dark, their ears they can't hear. But he's actually the one who, that interjection, that's what I take from it. In terms of a characterization of who Jesus is within this narrative, he's presenting himself, you know what, I am controlling all this, for this time. And then you get to the interpretation of the sower. And now, sorry, it's actually the parable of the soils is how I view it, because I know there's the seeds, but it's all the same seed, but the differences are in the soil. What grows in what soil. So that's an RT France thing. It's something I'll run with. These things can be a little bit plastic too. Someone wants to call it the parable of the sower. I am not going to battle over that, or the parable of the seed. But yeah, I think that's where the difference is. But you notice how there's, one soil is productive. One, then, and three of them fail, but only the cause of only one of those three has to do with the evil one. So he's immediately there's a contrast there between him and Jesus. Jesus, who we just learned was, he's got the ultimate control about who he is and who doesn't, and who's at this point. But the evil one doesn't. He only gets to affect some people. Yeah. So that really sits well with this theology that Matthew's been developing since 4, when Jesus defeated the evil one, the devil, in the temptation. And since then, they've been a defeated enemy. He's not that much of a significant enemy. He's significant. He's stopping people, but he's not really going to be one that ultimately stops, affects everyone, let alone, have that kind of control Jesus has. Before I move on, you've got something to say.
Sorry, no, it's so important to deal with that, because it happens over and over again. And even with recent video that was released, I don't know if you saw it, shared on the Rethinking Hell Facebook group, this video from Daniel Moritz. Chris State just responded to his latest video. But in his first, Daniel Moritz has now done 2. He's this Christian blogger. He's a model and has done very well for himself, and has loads and loads of subscribers from his 2 channels. But it takes a very proof text heavy view on the doctrine of hell, which is done in his first video is very much all about the imagery, at least, even though he doesn't say it too much, the imagery insinuates this tormentor, this devil that has power in hell. I think there's the tradition.
That sounds Catholic.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's this strong tradition of that coming from Catholicism. But yeah, the significance of the devil is we've given him too much power in our theology. I think sometimes you need to just wind that back. What does Jesus actually say about the devil? I mean, most of this is down to the person, the individual Soil, rather than this thing that has power over us.
So who has in the broad cosmic apocalyptic worldview, when you look at Daniel, then at Daniel or whatever, who has control over history, even though these kings are running rampant around the world? It's God. That's what Jesus is saying here, or Matthew is characterizing Jesus versus the evil one, is that he's there, he's doing stuff, but he ain't, he's not ultimately where, why the kingdom isn't yet growing. He's not. That's not ultimately why. So he's not that powerful. So that's why I say that it's that apocalyptic worldview, but it's couched in terms of Jesus is the narrative embodiment of that God over the Lord of history, but he's walking in history. So it's a narrative embodiment of that worldview. And I really just wanted to draw that point between Jesus and the evil one, because later we'll talk about all sources of evil being destroyed. So that's where that justice comes in that I was talking about. See how that eventually ties together? This isn't Matthew 13:40 isn't just some random thing he just threw there. It's part of part of a big theme he's unpacking. And
the more I hear people that have really studied this and know enough Greek to tie things together, and Matthew spent, and this is the same for all authors of the Bible. I think it's not just the words that are important to notice; it's the structure, the themes, the tying together. And we unfortunately, Protestants are particularly bad at this. I think Catholics are to some extent, but there's this idea that I can just pick a verse, read it, and there we go. That's the truth for today. I think that's what I mostly see traditionalist arguments. Hey, look, here's a verse ripped out of its entire this book, and I know what it means.
And it's plonked on Facebook without comment.
Yeah,
there you go.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Whipping and gnashing of teeth. Okay.
What, who, where, and I think the danger of that is, we're paying for the result. The result of all this teaching that says you can just go into the Bible, pick a verse, that's your theme for today. This is the outworking of that theology, that pick a verse a day theology, and for whatever reason that's become the way to handle something as heavy as hell. And it's the same with like the end times to some extent, that and now we've got to the extent that now when you challenge that as a conditionalist, is you're twisting it. That's what they tell us. Like, you're twisting scripture. No, I'm reading a book how it's meant to be read. Like, so I don't go into Moby Dick and expect A has to be what was it? I can't even remember the names of the characters now.
No, all I'm twisting.
Be the whale.
All I'm twisting is their interpretation of that verse. That's all I'm twisting. I'm not twisting the Bible.
Well, that's it. Yeah. But their interpretation is
sometimes you got to break people out of this idea that we don't have to interpret the Bible. That's rubbish. Everybody interprets everything. All communication is an interpretive event. It goes through your worldview grid. When you say a word, you write a word, and then when the target audience receives it, they interpret it through their worldview grid. No one has an absolutely identical worldview grid. We all might, within a similar culture, we might have a similar aspects and frameworks, but there's often a lot of miscommunication because assumptions are made within the worldview grid. And if you don't believe me, then why are there so many divorces in this world based on miscommunication between husband and wife? Why is there so many political debates? Why do people say, I don't understand what you're saying? You just said words, but it's common. And you know who came up with this theory of communication? Christian missiologists who were going to other cultures and trying to figure out why they couldn't just say, here's the Bible, and they were getting different messages than what they'd even just read the passage. They were getting different messages. That's not what we mean. No, but that's what we think you mean.
Yep.
So they had to figure that out. So the cultural anthropologist is grounded within Christian missiology, which was grounded in the idea we've got to probably communicate the Bible better and what we mean. And they actually ended up landing on, you know what, we can't tell them what we think. We can't tell them how. We have to train them and how to read the thing for themselves through their own culture and use that to critique their own culture rather than us coming in as outsiders, colonialism, and telling them that they should be like England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, you just hit so many points. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I work with international students, and having grown up overseas as well, and I find even in dealing with atheists in the West, they, especially the ex-Christians who read the Bible like this, like they've grown up with verse-a-day theology, but also that the Western way of reading the Bible is the way of reading the Bible. There's no way of dealing with this. Wrestling with the Scripture and going, what my worldview now isn't the worldview Jesus had. It isn't the worldview of the ancient church. We do need these frameworks unpacked before we bring our culture into the text and mess it up. But what's also part of that is this continual need to go back to reading the Bible in community, in teaching how to read the Bible. And you've got that example in Acts 8. The Ethiopian didn't know what he was reading. He needed Philip to go, here's the scriptures, here's how they point to Jesus. And when you give a new Christian or someone who's not really been taught how to read the Bible, and you start challenging their perceptions of what the Bible actually says, they've got nothing to stand on because they don't know how to read it. They're just like, well, my verse a day is falling apart because you've shown me how it doesn't mean what I thought it said. When you actually have this grounding, suddenly half the atheist arguments of like, this verse says this, it's like, well, no, it doesn't. And I know why it doesn't.
Yeah.
I've just noticed
there's a lot
Bill's
more
in the chat. That's all good. Hi, Bill.
Say a lot more, this is why
off track.
I'm banging on about Matthew's worldview. What is it? Not mine. What is his worldview? I don't even have to believe this. I don't have to be a believer to note this. I can be a New Testament scholar that's not a believer but is interested in what Matthew himself meant. And I think that's what we've got to get at. I mean, I'm a believer, don't get me wrong, and it drives me that way. So there's a lot more to the Christian faith than just reading the Bible. With the Holy Spirit's there. There's faith community. But what I'm saying here is really, if you want to understand what Matthew's saying, you've got to become attuned to his worldview. And you can't do that if you don't read his whole book, you know. If he wrote more than one more narrative, it would be even better because you get different perspectives. Writers come and they write stories at different perspectives. Oh, okay. But he only wrote one, but it's a long one and it's a good one. It's a narrative, and narratives communicate in different ways. They're not just through the Greek, the original Greek, and the grammar and the syntax. That's again going to lead you down. Well, it might not give you all the information you need. So you need to get attuned to that worldview. And we've gotten off track, so I'm going to bring us back on. That's all I've got. That's all I've got there for that passage.
Yeah.
I didn't want to spend too much time on it because we are going to in this next interpretive parable. So if you want to read for me 24 through to 43, okay, I would appreciate it.
No worries. That was a bit of a rabbit hole. I enjoyed that though. I think it's important.
As long as you don't care, I don't care, and the listeners go, okay, I don't care. I mean, nobody's hurt.
Yeah, we've only got Bill and maybe one or two others, so it's all good. They haven't complained, so we're all good. we'll keep going. It's those who come to this later.
Shut up.
Yeah, it's those who come back to this later and go 3 hours long. How do they talk so much? So right, let me get this next one up. So here we go. 24. He presented them with another parable. Kingdom of heaven is like a person who sowed good seed in his field. Now I'm just going to pause there. Like I've had this recently because there's also comments on Daniel Moritz's. I was talking about him just now. There's a load of comments. Jesus talked more about hell than he did about heaven. And I just want to bang my head against the wall every time I see that now because he clearly didn't. This is another one about the kingdom. We're like kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of heaven is throughout Matthew. Yeah. Anyway, well, that's my side.
You know what? If Jesus is the narrative embodiment of all this of the inbreaking kingdom of heaven, then the whole of Matthew is him talking about the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. And
what a dumb saying, and I don't know why we can't disabride even good scholars of it. Like, why does it keep coming
out? So infuriating.
Stupid. I'm sorry. I'm going to challenge Jonathan Pritchett from Trinity. It's stupid because it's just a myth that has just taken its own life, and people don't think it through. It's really easy to debunk, but it's like the Gehenna. It was a perpetually burning garbage. No, it wasn't. We'll prove it wasn't. No, I don't have to. There's just no evidence for it. Like It wasn't.
So I need to maybe I'll set up a bot to repeat it on Twitter. Jesus did not speak more on hell, then he didn't just send it out every day. Just this is your daily reminder that this is not true.
It might work.
And it is when scholars that should know better. I mean, we've got these free tools. I'm using one, Net Bible. You just search for hell and it barely comes up. You search for heaven and it comes up with loads. I've done it before on my channel. I won't do it again. Anyway, that's another rabbit hole. Let's keep going. The kingdom of heaven is like a person who sowed good seed in his field, but while everyone was sleeping, an enemy came and sowed darnel among the wheat and went away. When the plants sprouted and produced grain, then the darnel also appeared. So the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field?" Interesting, they used slaves there. Anyway, it's usually servants, I think. But anyway, Net Bible has gone for that. Then where did the darnel come from? He said, "An enemy has done this." So the slaves replied, "Do you want us to go and gather it?" But he said, "No, since in gathering the darnel you may uproot the wheat along with it. Let both grow together until harvest. At harvest time, I will tell the reapers, first collect the darnel and tie it in bundles to be burned, but then gather the wheat into my barn." He gave them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest garden plant and becomes a tree, so that the wild birds come and nest in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed with 3 measures of flour until all the dough had risen. Jesus spoke all these things in parables to the crowds. He did not speak to them without a parable. This fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I'll announce what has been hidden from the foundation of the world. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, "Explain to us the parable of the darnel in the field." And he answered, "The one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the people of the kingdom. The poisonous weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. As the poisonous weeds are collected and burned with fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather from his kingdom everything that causes sin, as well as all lawbreakers. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. The one who has ears had better listen."
Let him hear. All right. I'm going to swap things up. I'm going to ask you for your thoughts before I get mine.
Yeah. Whoa, controversial. Yeah.
Throw you on the spot.
Throw on the fire, so to speak.
It doesn't matter
They'll be
what
weeping
you
and gnashing
say.
of teeth. Yeah. So it's as I said, the repetition of the kingdom of heaven is what stands out to me when I read these things. But when you get down to this explanation, it's kind of hard to dodge the image of fire and what that does when you've considered Matthew 3, particularly because it's a similar kind of imagery of agriculture, of taking in the wheat, separating the chaff, clearing out the barn, burning the chaff, and storing the wheat. It burning up. We've talked about that strongest. Yeah, thanks, Bill. They will live forever. Of course. How else will they gnash their teeth? So we'll just ignore that. But
I'm going to get to that.
We'll get there. So we've got this: throw them into the fiery furnace. I mean, it's partly because I've been a conditionist now for a couple of years. That is, I think I'm losing my empathy, and how to read that in any other way is really quite difficult. Yeah. So it's this idea that I have to make, right, fire doesn't burn them up. I guess we do have a picture of that in the burning bush, but that's God.
Well, okay,
speaking.
All right.
Yeah.
So katakaya is used there in I think Exodus 3:1 or something like 3 or something like that. And katakaya is the word it means burn up, but it's also got the negative part of
it's not doing it.
Like, that's like
special.
me arguing. That's like me arguing and saying the word run doesn't mean run because at one stage we used it with not. It's like it's a stupid argument. It's just it doesn't mean katakaya doesn't mean to burn up. It just means in that instance, right?
Yep.
It didn't, and actually it uses kayo. It was burning, but it did not burn up. Katakayo, yeah. So how else do you describe a phenomenon like that?
Yeah.
But with normal language, but the negative particle, not. I don't think it's only the one. I can't remember if it's or may, but I mean, but that does come up on Facebook. Why?
Yeah. Oh, it's I don't know.
It doesn't change the meaning of the word. It actually it actually has the same meaning. It's just saying it isn't doing that.
Yep. It's a similar thing with the fiery furnace and Daniel. So I think that's that. But the reason I bring those up is because that's how I would think. I've got this image of something not burning up. Therefore, because tradition tells me this shouldn't burn things up, I have a framework already to deal with this. And that's when, as if I'm a traditionist, I go, you're twisting scripture because I've got this framework already in place that R.C. Sproul, John MacArthur, all these people say I should have. But now you're sort of tearing their framework up. And so as a conditionist, I'm going, this is so obvious. I look at the world. What does fire do? What does a fiery furnace do? Well, it burns up. I have to keep putting wood on the fire because the wood burns up. I have, if I'm separating wood and chaff, and I put a match to the chaff, it's explosive. It goes and it's no more. And I can use that language. And so Jesus isn't using that framework of, hey, look at. Jesus is very good at referencing the Old Testament. He's not like the fiery furnace that was like Moses' bush that didn't burn. He's saying this is like your fiery furnaces that you use in everyday life. You know what I'm talking about. And so when we've got such a structure that knows when to reference the Old Testament, it's a little bit odd, that they'd miss out that interesting bit of a burning bush, but that it's just so conclusive that, and it goes back to the justice thing, which we've talked about already. There's this complete removal of the waste. It's just gone. So that's kind of my thinking of trying to unpick what I would have thought as a traditionist, why I think that now.
I have encountered traditionalists that note that, when I say that fiery furnace, that's an allusion to Daniel 3 with those three thrown into it, and they go, "Oh, see, it doesn't burn up." Yeah, but they're protected. Like there's a
and what happens to those who aren't?
what happens to those who aren't? And isn't that conditionalist? So the fire doesn't burn, the ones that have that fourth angelic person here, but it's a superheated fire. Now I'm going to unpack a little bit later, maybe later in chapter 21. But that superheated fire to me sounds like one that they specially prepared. Yeah, sounds like something you'd say about an eternal fire that was prepared. But anyway,
it's something like that.
Dropping hints here.
It sounds familiar. So, what do you think, Darren? I've explained what I think.
Here you go.
So,
now, I'm going right back to a couple of things in the actual parable proper. Notice how he's talking about, now he's focusing on the enemy, just one person. Okay, so one, and I think that's probably going to end up to be the evil one anyway, or the devil. So he's actually now zoning in on that specific cause, or why people aren't really part of the kingdom, but he's coming from a different angle, where the sower, the sower does a good, sows some good seed, and then there's darnel is sowed by enemy. Now, darnel is weeds isn't a great one for translating. Darnel is probably better, but nobody understands what darnel is.
I have no idea what darnel is.
It's a weed that when it was younger, when it was a smaller plant, it looked like wheat, and you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
So when it grew up, we didn't know that was there. That's the kind of thing you discover it later as it matures, because you can't tell. So it fits the parable. The message of the parable is that there's Jesus saying, I'm going to be out there sowing the good news, spreading the kingdom, and you are going to have the enemy doing this as well, and it might not be apparent till later. When you do find out, don't worry, because there's a time coming when that can be dealt with. And what is it? The harvest. Yeah.
Yep.
And in that parable, when it talks about gathering them, it says gathering in bundles to be burned. That's where katakio is used. But gather the wheat in the barn. So there's some themes there he'll unpack. So I just want to draw attention to that first parable, that you can already see what Jesus is doing there. But then that interjection, I wanted to deal with that briefly. Notice those two tiny parables. Their main emphasis is that something that has a tiny beginning will grow, or will flourish, or So he's actually having said that parable and made it look like, this is enemy that's going to spoil it. Well, no, because eventually the kingdom will grow. That's basically what he's saying there. And then, curiously, he comes back to this theme of this was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables, will utter what has been hidden since the foundation of the world. But he's actually reversing it. Before, he was uttering it to hide. Now he's uttering parables to reveal. What is his whole ministry? His whole ministry since his baptism, he comes up. The heavens are open to him. He has access to the heavens, to the cosmic apocalyptic God, who's Lord over everything. The Spirit comes down on him. So he's got this dual thing going on here, where at the same time the parables hide things to people who are the weeds, but at the same time it's revealing. It's all very definite.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, so that revelation is really important when you think of an apocalyptic worldview, because what he's going to go on now is really explicitly talk about what happens to that enemy. Yeah. So he's just said, I'm revealing it, and here we go. So that's why we take, in terms of genre, Matthew 13:36 to 43 differently as a didactic passage. It has imagery in it, but it's a didactic passage meant to reveal. We contrast that with something like Daniel, Revelation, where traditions will treat that as the didactic passage, but this as more it's symbolic. They don't really burn up.
Right.
In terms of how you do a genre, that's just, again, I think problematic. I'm not going to call it stupid, because Revelation has a whole lot of issues you have to deal with before you can get to how you deal with that genre. But I think on the basics, it's like as G.K. Bill says, when you get to a point where you're wondering whether, I'm paraphrasing, you're wondering whether you should take this literally or figuratively, reverse what you would normally do. It's that much steeped in imagery. And a lot of the time, the imagery doesn't have anything to it. It's just framework for other things that do say something. And sometimes it's clear, sometimes it isn't. But here in Matthew, he's crystal clear. Yeah. So you can have confidence in that. So knowing the genre helps us. I wish people would be better with that. And we conditioners can really push that too. That was an aside. When we get to the elements of this interpretation, you notice there's quite a few things that stand out to me. I'll go down. One of them is that, and it's easy to miss, and I have missed this in the past. We've got the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. So it's almost like an allegory. It's an apocalyptic allegory. So he's giving players and events and situations to elements of the parable, and not all of the parts of the parable. So you don't overinterpret that parable. We just focus on what he's saying here. But notice how he has he identifies the evil one as the weeds are the sons of the evil one. And the evil one in Matthew is the devil. It's the one who tempted Jesus. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil. Now, the harvest is the close of the age, and the reapers are the angels. That reapers of the angels is very apocalyptic. So what he's doing here, he's now expanding that out to the cosmic worldview, as opposed to the strictly earthly narrative embodiment version of it. So here he's starting to get a bit apocalyptic in the true sense, in that we would see something like Revelation, but he's not couching it in it's not coming in a genre that makes it unclear. Doesn't hide it. So we have a lot of confidence here. Now notice here when he identifies the devil, there's only 3 times that Matthew uses the word the devil, or identifies the evil one as the devil. That's once in the temptation episode, and then here, and then in Matthew 25:41.
Right.
Wrap your head around that, and we'll come back to that when we talk to that. But I think he's deliberately connecting those 3 dots, those 3 passages. So what we say here, we're going to talk about more there with that prepared fire. Okay. Cool. All right. Do you have anything to say before I move on to the nitty gritty? Yeah, we're good. Okay. So I'm just working through the detail of what I know from my head, from my studies. All right. The harvest is clever. Okay. Now, burned with fire. That word burned is a technical issue there that I think as an exegete, I think we should note, so we have integrity. I don't think the original, when Matthew wrote, when it was, if he wrote in Aramaic, translated in the Greek, it was katakaya. I think it was kaio. I think that because there is a strong textual tradition in good early texts, manuscripts that have kaio, alongside good early ones that have katakaya. Scholars don't know which one's which, but it's more likely that a scribe would smooth things out. So if the scribe saw katakaya, which is in the parable proper, and then saw kaya, he would just automatically, it's usually not she's, it's usually he's, that wrote it. So would just put katakaya, wouldn't have even thought of it. So that tends to mean that kaya was in the original. It's not set in stone. There's traditional scholars who specialize in Matthew who think katakaya is the original. So it's not a be all and end all, but I do like to be honest as an exegete and discuss this. And I've given the reason why I think it is, but I think it doesn't matter. The reason I think it doesn't matter is because of the words just as, so also, or so will. In the Greek there, it literally means what we're trying to say with just as it happened with that kind of burning in the parable when they're burned up. So also here. So that textual tradition doesn't really mean much, but it does mean, if I note that we don't say katakaya is used there, and if some smarty who knows a bit of Greek goes, no, it's kaio, and I can just say, look, it's associated with that word, and I can unpack that. So I kind of mulled over that, but I'd like conditionalists to show evidence that they know this kind of stuff, because then we can exegesis is about knowing what the valid options for interpretation are, and then giving good reasons why you opt for one or the other. That's good exegesis in practice. So that's what I'm trying to lead you guys with there. But I would say, just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will be at the close of the age, is actually Jesus in this didactic passage saying they're going to burn up like words burn up. There isn't any way around that. I don't think any conditionalists would disagree with me with that. All right.
Well, they shouldn't. I think we could.
Yep. Now you get on from there. Going from there, the Son of Man will send his angels. That's very apocalyptic. This whole idea that he's sending them out. Now, why would I want to emphasize that? And why would I have wanted to emphasize earlier that how Jesus has said the same thing with they're signing the reapers as angels? Because I think that precludes the hyper-preterist interpretation of this verse as relating to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Can you just define hyper-preterist? Very quickly.
Well, a preterist. Well, Pt.8's one. I'm kind of one in some verses. Like I think Revelation is, and I think Joseph Deere's one. It just means that when you look at some prophecies or some things that they're talking in the Bible, in the New Testament, they're really more referring to what was going to be happening in that time, sometime, whether it's a prophecy or not. That's what they're referring to, and they may or may not
near
be
future.
Yeah, it might be in that earthly realm right there. But hyper-preterists will say everything in the New Testament was fulfilled back then.
Right. Yep.
Right?
Got you. So that includes new creation. Hope is already. It's already happening.
It's all. I haven't really sunk into all of what they say. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to misrepresent the different views that they might have. But that's basically the thrust of it. So this would relate to the destruction of 70 AD. I say no, because how on earth can you envision angels coming? In that apocalyptic sense, how is that even like comporting with an earthly destruction of an earthly city by an earthly power called Rome?
See, that's really fast. So the thing that when I have engaged with hyper-preterists, I just really struggle to empathize. I just can't see it, because not all causes of sin.
Oh yeah, I'll get into that. Yeah. That's right. You go for that. Yep.
Yeah, not all suffering is dealt with. Not all death is done with.
Yeah.
So, and that's generally my question. And I kind of, the last hyper-preterist I engaged with was just like, do you not have anyone die around you? That was my response. Like, how can this be what the Bible says when we see this word, one day there'll be no more death? You believe it's fulfilled. I can't empathize beyond that, because that is the theme of Scripture, is that one day death will be no more. Jesus has given us life over death, and that, yes, that's partly now, but we wait for its full fulfillment. And I just can't get beyond that. So that's what stops me getting in. If there are any hyper-preterists that watch this, feel free to send a message. But
it's considered by the likes of Pt.8 to be a rank heresy, because if it's all fulfilled back then where's our salvation? But I can't wade into that pool so much myself. I need to unpack. I need to obviously engage with them.
I probably do as well, but there's more important things.
But when it comes to how I interpret this passage, no, I can't see it through a hyper-preterist eyes, just for that reason. And then you got the other one, all causes of evil, which I was going to come to. No, that's fine, because it works. It's part of the same point that I'm making anyway. And I think, you drive from this apocalyptic worldview where there really are demons, there really are spiritual powers behind these earthly kingdoms and earthly events and sicknesses of people, as it turns out in Matthew. So when Matthew has Jesus exorcising demons, it's often part and parcel of him healing them. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's not two different things. So I think Frank Peretti was a little bit right in his stories. So not that I'd say you overly schematicize it now and have it happening now. But I think Frank Peretti was right, is that the Bible does have that. I don't know if anyone knows who I'm talking about, Frank Peretti.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I read him when I was a
He
teen.
got caned. Yeah, he got caned for having, leading people to think there's demons are more active than that. Well, this is Matthew.
Yeah.
This is
yeah.
So he's got a point.
Yeah.
This is a real thing that's happening inside. The spiritual entities are working against Christ.
Mm-hmm.
How do hyper-preterists explain that and their destruction? So when it gets to all evil, I think that he's not just talking about the devil who sows his sons who are evil. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
He's also, I remember last time I alluded, I discussed that section, it was late in 12. Hang on, I'm bringing it. Where was it? Anyway, where is it? This is the problem when I don't. Oh, here we are. Matthew 12, 34 to 37. He says to the Pharisees, "You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil?" You are evil?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You are evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So you're evil, and out of you comes evil, basically. A good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. But I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you'll be justified. Justified. Judged. And by your word you'll be condemned. I don't know if Chris's is there in that one, but it's the concept is.
Give me the verse. I can just quickly look. 12.
No. We could. What was it? Okay, you're curious. And so am I, but I know I've banged on a lot already. So that's in 37. So it says, "For by your words you'll be justified."
12:37.
No, that's by your words be justified. No, that's not bring justice. That's a different word. But then the word condemned, I think, is probably
condemned.
It's condemned. It's probably different. Yeah,
slightly
but
different.
See how the justice is still there. Some of you are justified.
It is. Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't want to draw too much to that. I wanted to draw attention to how Jesus is talking to them as if evil is coming from them. And that's why they're doing, they do the sin they do. Well, he's not actually saying that, but it's implied. And then here you've got all causes of sin. So who's causing sin? The devil who sows the seeds, the sons of the of the devil who's sowing it. They're evil. And then you've got these people who also have evil, and they obviously do bad things because it comes out of them. They're sources of evil, the sources of sin. Matthew is saying in 13:42 that all of those causes are included in this burning up. They're going to be burned up. I used to think because it was a bit of a neutral statement that it included causes of evil that come from non-living beings, but I don't think that anymore. I think Matthew is there's enough hints in Matthew to say, look, he has in mind all types of people and entities that can cause evil. That's a very comprehensive statement, and those are going to be what? They're going to be like the weeds that are burned up in that fire at the judgment. Yeah. So again, that kind of to me it precludes a hyper-preterist point of view.
Absolutely, and it also precludes that these are just entities that aren't human. I think is both just as we are in 38. The field is the world, and the good seed are the people of the kingdom. Well, we would immediately go, well, that's us Christians. We're the people of the kingdom. The weeds, the poisonous weeds, the people of the evil one. Well, that must be people. They're and so they must be the causes of sin and all lawbreakers that are put in this fire. Because
lawbreakers.
That's the way that paragraph seems to work to me, and I think again, to fight against that, you have to break every verse out of its context to then make it work. But
notice that how it encompasses both human beings and supernatural beings, and that fire is a like I already talked about it. How when the fiery furnace, I don't know what you got in your version. And they'll gather out of his kingdom all causes. Yep. So fiery furnace. A lot of scholars go, "Oh, that's Daniel 3." Okay, and you look at that. That's a fire that's stoked 10 times hotter. So what he's saying, what he's alluding to, is that fire that's prepared enough to burn whatever it was meant to, but to do more than what it should. And Jesus has got here this demonic beings involved in that, and they're going to be burned up. So when I look later at 21:45 and see prepared for, I go, well, I'm thinking of this. I'm not taking that out of context and then even going to Jude 7. It could do that, but traditionalists go to, where do they go with it? They go to Revelation, right? And so they'll go 20:10, go, look, it's prepared for them to torment them. I'll go, well, I'll look at Matthew, please, first. And so I have. And this, to me, is and remember I said before, later, the devil is the only time it's used is with the temptation here in this one where he says they're burned up, and then when he says that fire, that eternal fire, is prepared for the devil and his angels. Yeah. So I think Matthew's telling us that furnace is being that superheated furnace is prepared to do exactly this job he's saying that the fire does to the weeds.
I think it's really important to notice the framework used there as well. So there's an interesting framework to read Matthew and then jump to Revelation to explain Matthew, despite just in the sense of how that works out. You're going to a fairly symbolic, difficult verse to explain something that actually the Old Testament explains better. And given the structure and framework of Matthew, Matthew is continually going, look at the prophets, look at the Old Testament, look at the prophets, look at the Old Testament, which also John in Revelation does as well. So they're both going, look at the Old Testament, this is who Jesus is. Look at the Old Testament, this is what will happen in judgment. Look at the Old Testament, this is what will happen. And so for someone to read this and go, right, my answer isn't in the Old Testament, it's in the New, is breaking from what Matthew wants them to see.
Yeah.
So they should harmonize.
Yeah. Well, he does this actually, John does this in Revelation anyway. So it's not two different methods that they use, but this is what Matthew and John do. They go, I'm alluding or I'm quoting or I'm doing something with the Old Testament. I want you to go back and have a look at it and then come back to what I'm saying here and view that with new eyes. So it's a continual process where you're looking at the old, you're looking at the new. Oh, go back and look at the old. So that's called intertextuality. So when you get someone like Matt Slick saying, and he's got an article and he says, the traditionalists, they just look at the New Testament through the Old Testament. You go, well, no, we don't. We just follow the exegesis. But that intertextuality is a real thing, and I've got books and books and books on this, on how to do that. It's a cop-out kind of response to say that's what we do, and you should only ever interpret the Old Testament by the very last word or by the New Testament. That isn't how the New Testament authors intended you to look at the Old Testament and their writings as they allude to it. They want you to see what's going on in the Old Testament, and they want you to come back and look through it through that particular worldview, that imagery, And it's not equal how they do it either. They can do it in really vague ways. Sometimes they can do it in passing. They can do it in very deliberate ways. And you've got to look at how they're changing things. If they don't change something, they're not obviously, or they're not yet in their own context, then you can't say it's this progressive revelation. You just, you can't. Because they're not doing it. That's you saying it is. That's not them saying it is. I'll go down another rabbit hole if I keep going. But that's I think that's just
Sorry, just to sort of close on that a little bit. But let's do that very briefly then with verse 42, where they will throw them into the fiery furnace. Well, the fiery furnace is an allusion to Daniel, where we have a fiery furnace. What happens in that fiery furnace? Well, it's stoked. It's hotter. It consumes those who are close to it. They die, but only those protected within it by, well,
a fourth angelic
fluid. Let's call him Christ. Let's go for it. There's Jesus in there. Son of God is in there with him, and we can go down a theological rabbit hole with that one later. But that is a fiery furnace where only the exception are saved. Let's go back now to Matthew. What's happening here? Well, there are the saved, those that are collected and for the kingdom, and there are those who are thrown into this fiery furnace, prepared for them. Well, what's going to happen? They aren't part of those that are rescued. They're going to be the ones that are consumed. to then go into, well, let's look at Revelation. Well, no, you've missed what he's saying. You missed what Matthew's saying. Matthew isn't referring to John. John refers to Isaiah as well. He goes to the Old Testament, and then you
He's
see
got his own
Edom,
way.
and so it's this idea that yes, John and Matthew both agree, but they won't agree in the way that you think that they do unless you go back into the Old Testament, reflecting on what Matthew's actually saying before you then reflect on what John's saying in Revelation. So that would be just a kind of example of that.
What point is Matthew making here in 13? It's not that they're surviving. He's not saying anything about anyone surviving in the fire. He's explicitly saying in this didactic passage that it's just like the weeds and they're burned up. So, yes, he is making a change to the story in the sense that he's not trying to get us to say, oh, this fire is going to be like, these evil people are going to be like the three in the fire and survive. No, because they're righteous. These people aren't right. That's not what he's saying. Because then you have to say these people, you have to say the weeping and gnashing people, the devil and everything, they're righteous. No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying it's a prepared fire. He's saying it's a prepared fire that is really hot. The other text you might get to is Malachi 4:2 or something like that, where you got the oven. It might be 4:1. The super, it's a fiery oven. It's more explicit about it being. Can you read that verse? Because there was something that does indicate that Matthew could have had this verse in mind as well, and it's not unusual for them to conflate images and conflate verses. Yeah.
Oh, that happens all the time in Revelation. Yeah, absolutely. So. 4:1, for indeed the day is coming, burning like a furnace. Yeah, that sounds about right. And all the arrogant evildoers will be chaff. That sounds more like 3:12. And so Matthew seems to be using this a couple times.
Yeah. The arrogant evildoers kind of makes you think, okay, so you're not beholden to this lavish literalism in the Old Testament, as if the New Testament author is going, oh, okay, you've got to get that quote exactly. It's not like what we do in essays where we got to quote someone exactly, and cite exactly who they are, or where it's plagiarism. No, he's getting you to reflect, and there might be more than one point in the Old Testament that he has in mind. Yeah. And when scholars picked you go, let's go and reflect. So why not reflect on both? I mean, that's even more like, in some ways, more like Daniel's, what Matthew's trying to get at than Daniel 3 is, because it's explicitly saying they're burned up. It has all the evil, in view. It's still a heated oven, like it's a hot oven, which would have been in and of itself like that kind of thing you stoke up. So, so you have 2 points with which you can kind of get an idea what Matthew was getting at.
Malachi, just that whole section going all the way to verse 3 is just complete. Like, let's just grant, okay, Matthew is a little bit vague on what this fire furnace. Let's grant that, okay, but let's say he's quoting. Okay, so he's quoting Malachi. Let's read Malachi. What does Malachi say? We'll burn them up. It will not leave them even a root or a branch. But you who respect my name, there will be vindication, and you will rise with healing. And you skip about like calves released from the stall. So there's life, but you will trample on the wicked, for they will be, so those that are like chaff, they'll be like ashes under the soles of your feet on the day that I'm preparing. Oh, there's that word, prepared. But it's fairly complete. I think, sure, we could even grant that death doesn't mean non-existence, but death here means they're ashes. So they're dead.
Look at that branches and roots. That's to say the whole plant's
it's gone.
Burn up. What do you do with the weed when you pull it out of the ground? You got the weeds, you got the body of the weed, the darnel, and you've got the roots, and you throw it in the fire. Like it doesn't have to always draw it out explicitly, but it's there. The concept's there.
Yeah,
and none of that speaks to, and even Daniel 3, aside from being specially protected, none of it speaks to anyone surviving that.
Oh, but there's weeping and gnashing and teeth.
Okay, so we'll get to that. Right. So, is there anything else? I'm just gonna, before I get to it. Okay, let's deal with that. Let's go in that place. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. What a nothing point. Okay, first of all, I know after years of
but all
arguing,
of what you've just said just goes out the window.
well,
Because there's this.
the
Look,
assumption
they're
is the
experiencing.
assumption is that we believe in ceasing to exist. We believe it's blipping out of existence. Look, there's a little bit of affliction there. They experience it. Therefore, you can't account for how they could experience their burning up. What?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can say this. Okay, it only says it's in their place, and it does not say the weeping and gnashing will happen forever. There's none of that language there.
Yeah.
All right. It just says basically, and I think it's a summary statement, in that place means as they're gathered to that place, as they're thrown into the fire, as they're burned up by it, they'll weep and gnash their teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And like, whoever said that being burned up didn't make you weep and gnash your teeth? Whoever said that on the day of judgment, when you're gathered to the place you're going to be judged, that you wouldn't weep and gnash your teeth?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but when I was a traditionalist, this was the go-to thing, and we'd say, that's drilled into you to think weeping, gnashing in teeth means they're going to weep and gnash in the fire forever. It's not what the text is saying. And then the assumption is we can't account for it. Yes, we can. It's a nothing point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't take them anywhere.
No.
So what I do now,
it takes them to Matthew 25.
What I do now, instead of just saying, quoting or saying Matthew 13:40 talks about them burning up, I will say now, Matthew 13:40 to 42 talks about them weeping and gnashing their teeth as they're dragged to the place, as they're thrown into the fire, as they're burned up the fire. Oh, and that fire actually burns them up. I never get a response because they know that I've already accounted for it. See? So it just means I change the way that I might argue from that verse. Yeah. But since I've done that, no one has been able, no one has, maybe it just means that they think I'm wrong and they don't care.
They just call you a heretic and stop arguing.
No, not always. But I don't get responses now, whereas I used to get it. Oh, but you're cherry picking because with me gnashing your teeth. They can't say that I'm cherry picking anymore because I've included that in my explanation. I've already accounted for it. Okay. Yeah. So when I find that kind of, when I change the way that I might present my argument, it's refined it. It's better. I'm advancing the argument, but you don't get that a lot from traditionalists. They just keep going back to it's weeping, gnashing your teeth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that,
sorry.
The arguments have not changed. And even these new, so just on that point, I won't respond to this new video from Daniel Moritz, despite I've done a response to his first video. His second one is exactly the same. And he starts off with Matthew 10:28. Yeah. And he used I checked today actually, he uses Matthew 10:28 in his first video, and I explained Gehenna, destroy, talked a little bit about similar stuff that we've discussed. I went to his second video. It starts off exactly. See, look, God will destroy. You're like, exactly. Will destroy. And these first two verses, Matthew 10:28 and then Luke 16, and it's just this is exactly the same arguments that you've picked up from some manual on how to speak about hell without really speaking about judgment.
Yeah. Most books of traditionalists come to that point at some stage where they're just repeating. Some of them do get biased, like I think it's Eldon Woolcock's got a really long one, comprehensive one. He tries to get beyond a bit the normal. There's a few guys, I can't remember their name, Zach Zeal, I think he's developed some new argument. It's good. But by and large, you often don't get it. You even get something like Denny Burke in the second edition of Four Views on Hell.
Four Views, yeah.
Yeah, and he's just deliberately repeating Robert Peterson's argument from that book, Two Views of Hell. I think
probably was, yeah.
Which had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different proof texts that Peterson used that were debunked by Fudge. Okay. Yeah. So Fudge showed why you just got it wrong. Denny Burke doesn't really advance on what the responses from Fudge were. He just repeats basically what Peterson said. So it just goes nowhere. And when a conditionalist looks at that and they've actually seen the arguments and they've seen good rebuttals of it, and then they go and read Danny Berg, they go, again, yeah, that's the kind of feeling you get. But when you read something that's new, I actually celebrate that. So if a traditionalist has taken time to develop a new argument, and you do get them, you go, oh, right, I'm digging in. And that drives me to read the Bible a bit clearer because, there's always stuff you miss. And there's always perspectives, but a lot of the time it turns out there's just inventive ways. But there is good stuff here and there. It's just not enough by any means.
Absolutely.
But that weeping and gnashing of teeth is just one that is it's like the garbage dump. Again, it was a garbage dump. It's just one that won't die. They'll just keep it because it's easy, it's pithy, it's easy, and they think they can just quote it. So you're going to have to be prepared to deal with it. And as I said, the way I deal with it is I deal with it by when I express my argument from the passage, I include it as part of the argument. So I've got a strong argument. They can't assume that that it's blipping out of existence. Moving now to the last verse.
Yeah, let's keep going.
43.
All good.
What does that remind you of when you read it? Read it out, and what does that remind you of?
So the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. The one who has ears had better listen. I should know where that points to. That's again Daniel.
Daniel what? Daniel what?
Daniel what? Well, I've just looked at the reference. It's Daniel 12. Yeah.
Which verse is it? I never can remember what the verse. Which 1, 2, or 3?
It is verse 3. But the wise will shine like the brightness of the heavenly expanse, and those bringing many to righteousness will be like the stars forever and ever.
There may be other references in the Old Testament, but that's where most Matthean scholars point to. And notice here that there's a little bit difference in Matthew in that it's only after that all the evil, there was lawbreakers burn up. Then, see that word, that then they, believers will shine like the stars or like the sun. Yeah. So that's an interesting little difference between Daniel. I don't think I checked it the other day, and Daniel kind of has them at the same. One's resurrect, the other's and it's just it's two fates that are happening at the same time. Well, that's how it's expressed. It's like a contrast, but it's not really putting a timeline on it. Whereas Matthew is. He's saying, look, we're going to day of judgment. They're all gathered there, boom, burn up, and then the righteous, kingdom of heaven. So I think that's important because I think William Tanksley has drawn attention to this and tried to argue it with traditions. He's saying, well, how do you account for that? How do you that burning? Are they going to throw in and they're going to continue to exist? Then it maybe not any kind of silver bullet, but you have to try and explain that then. And it seems in Matthew to be a sequential thing, like it's
William Tanksley's been good at drawing in those sequential things. He does that very well with 2 Thessalonians 1:9, and I've seen him do it with 2 Peter, the judgment passage. 2 Peter 4. Is it 4?
He's 3? Better at it than me.
Yeah. he's really good at it. No, it's all good.
And he knows Latin.
Some people are like that.
He's a walking encyclopedia. If I want to know something about extra biblical literature, like intertestamental literature, if I want to know something about the Greek, Latin, Hebrew, I want to know something about how literary devices are used in the Bible or church history. He's one of the first people I go to. He's like, yep, and he knows science too. So when people come to him with, well, fire can't really change the basic properties of people, he's like, oh, you're kidding, you don't know science. And
he'll bring in that as well.
All right. So I'm very limited in what I can and can't do, but he seems to be like he's a walking encyclopedia of everything.
He's a good guy to know.
Yep.
Shout out to William Tanksley. Check him out on rethinkinghell.com. There you go.
Well, that's all I've got.
If he watches this, I've interviewed him on this channel. So if you don't know who William Tanksley Jr. is, then check out the video on my channel. Shall we?
Another thing. One more thing.
Go for it.
The close of the age. The hyper-preterists will say, that's just, or a universalist might say this too, that the close of the age has to do with just, earthly epochs. And I'm probably more comfortable with talking to the hyper preterists because they're going to say, all this apocalyptic stuff means, it's not going to be that earthly scene. It's more transcendent cosmic view that's in a transcendent and cosmic view that's in play here. So that tends to rule, help me there. But with a universalist, they'll try and say, oh, look, there's different epochs, and that's really hard to combat because they've gone through all of those verses where Ion and Ionius is used and gone, okay, Ephesians got ages upon ages, and you've got that kind of thing. So that's something you also, when you can't just use arguments and exegesis that we've geared towards traditionalists because they've been traditionally opponents, and then try to expect them to always fly with a universalist because they'll just go, oh, yeah, they're destroyed. But you know what? Later on in another epoch, they're going to be another age. They're going to be restored again. Even evil beings, like yeah. But then they can even admit that it's all burned up, or that kind of thing. It depends on the scheme that they got. So you do have to know pick your battles. I've got to go to a completely different way of arguing about that language, looking at the whole of the Bible if I'm going to address that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably where most of my time is at the moment, is looking at these universalist arguments. I do actually, because traditionalist arguments haven't shifted at all. Generally, I can walk into a traditionalist discussion cold and know what I'm going to get and be able to respond to it. But there are these arguments, especially around Ionios and Eternal, that the discussion is very different with universalism. I'm not convinced by their arguments, but it is, I have to change tack here because this is a very different view on things, and that's something I haven't quite.
They have a very good sense of the meta, the Bible overall, and they create their own meta narrative out of that, and they get a very good sense of where everything plugs in. They can take you here and there. Sometimes traditionalists will have somewhat of that, but usually not. It's just more piecemeal, proof texting. And they even, some of their case denies that you can even do that. Tradition shouldn't even be doing that at all. It's the last word. That's STR, stand the reason they've argued that. Excuse me. But your universalists are very good with that big picture, and
absolutely,
I think, and usually you can drill down into exegesis and really discuss there. But here with that language of age, it's a bit harder because it can be a little bit flexible in that way, as they say. So I just think that in biblical scholarship, generally you've got this idea that in the Old Testament you had this idea of two ages. That was it. It wasn't always eschatological like we think. And then Jesus came in, he actually kind of made them overlap. So you got three ages. You've got the Old Testament bit, and then you've got the new and the now not yet, and then the completion. But what they want to argue is that you've got these successive things, and it actually extrapolates beyond the day of judgment, and much more happens then. But that's not actually in Revelation. They've got to extrapolate, and that's one of the reasons I really struggle with it a lot. But I need to talk to them more and get more of their arguments and address more and learn.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely the same.
To close out, you've got a few little random parables that Jesus tells. Do you want to read from 54 right through to the end of the chapter? We'll just briefly mention one, and then the rest is just, it doesn't really seem to have much to do with our subject, what we're concerned with.
No worries. I'll bring that up on the screen. No worries. 44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field that a person found and hid. And because of joy, he went and sold all that he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. When he found a pearl of great value, he went out and sold everything he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was cast into the sea that caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, he pulled it ashore, sat down and put the good fish into containers and threw the bad away. It will be this way at the end of the age. Angels will come and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all these things? They replied. Have you understood all these things? They replied, yes. Then he said to them, therefore, every expert in the law who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the owner of a house who brings out of his treasure what is new and old. So I'll just finish this off. Now, when Jesus finished these parables, he moved on from there. Then he came to his hometown and began to teach the people in their synagogue. They were astonished and said, "Where did this man get such wisdom and miraculous powers? Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? Aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And aren't all his sisters here with us? So where did he get all this?" And so they took offense at him. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own house." And he did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief.
Yeah, a lot of that doesn't really relate. At least I haven't seen much. And that second parable with the fishnet doesn't seem to advance on the major one. It just repeats it a bit. It doesn't even have the word katakaya there. And it's almost like that larger one where he really interpreted it's how you're meant to see the rest of these kinds of parables. He's interpreting. You really should see it now. It's a bit weird that you're taking fish, get out of the sea, and throwing them out. But again, the idea of a full net is a full harvest, and it's not until the net is full that it's dragged out. Yeah, but who knows why you'd burn fish like that?
So
I could probably look into that a bit more, but I can't see anything that stands out that warrants any more comment.
I was just looking at what Matthew France says about that particular bit, and he doesn't really draw anything else.
Seems like an anticlimax.
It does, yeah. Like it does a bit. So that they'll be sorted, the bad will be removed, they'll be unsuitable for eating. So you're not going to eat them once they're in the fire, but what do you expect to happen when they go in there? And it's really annoying when you're barbecuing your burger and your burger falls through the grill, and well, what happens eventually? The burger burns up, doesn't it? It's not like it's going to be there all the time.
I admit I haven't looked into it all, so I'm going to have to do that.
You're going to hold fire.
It seems to be you're supposed to see that in the same way as you see the weeds being burned up. It has enough similarities. Yeah. Again, you got the angels there.
All the sorting. So Matthew France doesn't. That's the commentary I've got at the moment going through this, but there's not much else to build on. I don't think there's any other arguments that they can get out of there.
I'll look into it one day. Sometimes you just have to put things aside and then you come back and it wasn't. So that's fine. So if someone ever brought up, said something about, you missed this, that's fine. I always take that on board, go and investigate, come back and go, maybe. Yeah, that's fine. So that's all I had, really. I really wanted to do what I did, and that's kind of show how that theme is developing, how what we're talking about today relates to 2541, and just really give some ideas on how we should be interpreting that major passage where they're obviously he's telling them that all evil is going to be burned up, all evil people, all lawbreakers, but really also how we might plug that into Matthew's worldview rather than take it out of its context. And hopefully people will conditions have a better idea of how they might argue from it. They might have their own ideas. That's fine. But that's
all
really
of that, yeah. I think the thing for me is quite interesting that it goes that the parable. It's interesting that the parable of the pearl and the great joy, because this is good news, and this is something that I ponder and something that I've personally experienced. I'm sure I've talked to you about it before, Darren, but just to sort of conclude on this, that there's something about the gospel that is incredibly good news, that is worth selling everything for, giving up everything for, worth spending hours on YouTube talking about. But and for me, it was recognizing that conditionism has helped me recognize what that good news is. It is it's that idea that one day this great evil, this thing called death, this thing that's personified evil throughout, that we call the devil, all of it won't be contained in some prison and allowed to just be there forever. And I don't find that good news at all. The fact that God would sustain anything in its torment forever, even if it's a self-torment, that just is something that's quite grotesque, I find, about that. Now, looking back, I didn't when I was a traditionalist, I rationalized it away. But there is something quite grotesque to, and I can empathize with the atheist. It's like, you call this God of love and you're telling me that he'll torment whoever forever, and then he loves me. Like, what's that about? I completely find that emotional argument quite valid now. And so the good news is that we are saved from this death that is and given life. And so now we've laughed about it before. It's not simply death. It's not simply ash. It's not simply anything. It's a total removal, exile to oblivion, to utter darkness. This is horrible stuff, but you won't be tormented forever and ever. You will be allowed to reject the God of life. And if you reject life, what alternative do you have? And we have Christ. He saved us from that death. So this thing that's worth dying for is this good news that one day death will be no more. And so for me, this is just an incredible digging into the scriptures. Why is it a pearl of great value? Well, because we find life there, and what better news to share with other people. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, is that all of this theology has impacted my faith so much to be that this is a God worth following. He is the Messiah. Who is this Jesus is the question Matthew wants you to ask. And well, some doubted, but this has made me more confident than ever that he's a God of life. So that's a little bit of a mini preach there, but personally, that's why this is important to me. So if anyone gets to hour 25 that we're currently on in this part 8, that's kind of why we're doing this. This is why it's worth my time. So that's my concluding points on that. And I see Morg. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your smiley face. I appreciate that. Darren, anything else to say on Matthew chapter 13?
No, I already said a lot.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
I allowed you to relax in that last bit. There you go.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. I think I always say too much.
It's all good.
I don't think I could add to it.
Cool.
So I won't.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll finish there. And I'm not sure if Bill's still around. I think he popped in and popped out again. But Bill, thanks for joining us earlier. And Morg, thanks for joining us. I'm not sure if you've been on my channel before, but thanks. And I believe you're on Rethinking Hell, because that's the only place I've really shared it, unless you're on Twitter. But either way, welcome. Thank you. Feel free to share this if you found it helpful. And Darren, once again, thanks for your time. We'll hopefully do this again in a couple of weeks and figure out how many chapters we can get through in the next session. So,
yeah. Oh, I did have one thought. Notice
go on.
Matthew's broken up in 5 sermons, broken up with ministry. The first 3 have been heavily conditionalist. I know. So where he's teaching, it's been heavily either annihilationist or conditionalist. We've only got 2 more to go. So 3 out of the 2 major sermons he's had, you can say, man, this is really supporting conditionalism. So it's not just a few verses. That's a different way of looking at it. So we'll probably do the bit in between this sermon and the next. So there'll be him running around doing whatever in his ministry and seeing what themes are developed there, and then we'll get to the next sermon. Yeah,
that's good.
That sound right?
Yeah, all good. So great. Well, we'll leave it there, and we'll thank you again, Morg, and thanks for the sub. And we'll see you around. We'll let you know on the Facebook page, and when we're next doing this, feel free to, if you're on Twitter, follow Hellproj, the Hellproj. On Twitter, and you'll find out more from there. Nice. I'll end there. Stop rambling. God bless. We'll see you soon.
Sweet. See ya.